You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, guys? It is Dillo, and welcome to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. This is episode 15, and we are going to be covering today a couple of things. Want to start off with the Bellator 251 main event because somebody from the UFC who was actually on a winning streak recently made their Bellator debut in the main event. And I also want to talk about the return of Dana White's Contender series. Yes, it is back. Like I said a while ago, I believe it was September, the last episode. The last episode of the Dana White's Contender series, I said it'll be coming back in November, and I was right. November 4th, it came back, and we have 4 more UFC fighters to look for in the UFC, and I will get to that in a bit. But just before I start the entire podcast, I just wanted to say sorry if you hear that I'm, a little stuffed up, or, I may clear my throat or sniffle every now and then during the podcasts. That's my fault. I'm sick. I'm not feeling the best, but I believe it's just a cold. But, the show must go on. I can't just use an excuse like that to stay away from you guys. So anyway, with that out of the way and explained, let's get into everything we're going to talk about today. So starting off, like I said, I wanted to start off with Bellator 251. There's specifically 2 fights I want to talk about, and we'll start off with the first one before we get to the main event, because obviously the main event is the other one I want to talk about, but we'll get into that in a bit. The first fight, though, is Austin Vanderford, who is actually Paige Van Zant's husband, or Paige Vanderford now, as she's probably going to be known for. Everybody knows Paige Van Zant. She was on Dancing with the Stars, one of the few UFC fighters to actually break ground on that, and I kind of believe she should have stayed in that type of business, modeling and stuff, because she's very skillful, but compared to the rest of the women's divisions, no. And she will be making her bare knuckle FC debut. I can't exactly remember the exact date, but it's official. She will be making her bare knuckle debut, which is a little nerve wracking to me. But anyway, Austin Vanderford versus Vinicius de Jesus, I believe his name was. And he was supposed to be Austin Vanderford's biggest challenge yet. And let me just say, Austin made very easy work of this guy. It wasn't quick at all. It was obviously, it went to unanimous decision, but the entire game was just on the ground. The entire fight was on the ground. Austin Vanderford trying with submissions, brutally pounding him into the canvas. That pretty much told the story of rounds 1 and 2, the submissions and the ground and pound. Round 3 is exactly what I wanted to talk about, though, because he was brutalizing this poor guy. At some point, had him cut, bleeding, had him in trouble to the point where the ref probably could have stopped it, but he didn't. And it ended up going to a unanimous decision. But obviously, after the bell rang, Vinicius, or whatever his name is, was just on the ground in pretty much a puddle of blood because Austin Vanderford just put it on him. And he moves to 10-0. And I believe he's a welterweight. And I wouldn't be surprised seeing Vanderford face some top competition in their welterweight division sometime soon. It seems, from what I've been noticing, because I've been following Vanderford's career for a good while now, especially when he was on the Contender series a couple years ago. Still don't understand why he didn't get that contract, but I'm not here about that. So my question is he going to touch the welterweight belt? Is he going to be the next guy that steps in the cage with Douglas Lima? That's definitely a good question to ask. But I want to see him up against some actual top-ranked competition first, because, like I said, I've been following this guy for a while. And from what it seems like, I don't want to say the guys he's been facing are bums, but it feels more so like he is padding his record, or he's allowing Bellator to pad his record before all else. But yeah, I just want to say congratulations to Paige Van Zant's husband. Obviously, he did an incredible job. He's a very skillful ground artist. I believe he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a very good grappler. Very, very good grappler. Anyway, that's it for the Vanderford fight. What I wanted to actually talk about at Bellator 251 was the main event. which was UFC's Corey Anderson, who most recently upset Johnny Walker by knocking him clean out at UFC 244. And then after that, he had some contract issues with the UFC. Um, he, I guess it was like something along the lines of like payment. He wanted to explore free agency because the UFC wasn't giving him what he wanted, I guess. And one of the options was Bellator, and he took it. And honestly, even though Bellator is known for the retirement home for you know UFC fighters, Corey Anderson was different. He was on a winning streak before he left the company. His last fight only being his only loss in a while since like 2017, I believe. Um, it was against I believe Jan Blachowicz. He knocked him out. That was actually in the main event of their fight night, and yeah, it was the only loss he'd suffered in almost 3 years. He was top of the division, on his way to fight for the title, most likely. And he decided he wasn't going to take a job with the UFC, and he took one for Bellator. So this was his debut against a UFC veteran and an all around combat sports and MMA veteran, Melvin Manhoff. He's a Dutch kickboxer. He's very good at kickboxing, but that's pretty much his base. Like, he's always been known kind of like Paul Daly as a striker. He's got all right grappling, unlike Paul Daly, but it's pretty much a one-dimensional fighter, just like Paul Daly is. And I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me. A lot of the UK people are going to get mad at me for saying that Paul Daly is a one-dimensional fighter, but he is. You put him up against strikers, and he actually does good when he's up against kickboxers, boxers, Muay Thai specialists. The moment you put him against a jiu-jitsu artist or a wrestler, it is the most one-sided fight that you'll ever see as a fan of mixed martial arts. And that was pretty much how the main event went here. The first round started off great. Melvin Manhoff throwing a couple of strikes. They were trying to find their distance, but I want to say not even maybe a minute into the first round, the story of the fight was already written. Corey Anderson went in, ragdolled him to the ground, and that was the story of the fight. Corey Anderson in top position with the top pressure, just raining down strikes the whole time. And after that first exchange in the first round, it was pretty obvious that Melvin Manhoff had no business being in there with Corey Anderson. And this is exactly why some people make fun of Bellator for being the promotion it is. So, anyway, um, that was the entire first round. Corey Anderson just completing top pressure and holding that top pressure was a little bit slow paced. Punches from top position. The second round was no different. He ragdolled Manhoff to the ground again, but this time it was clear with the strikes that he was throwing, he was hurting Manhoff. He was chipping away at Melvin Manhoff. So the strikes clearly hurt Melvin Manhoff. And I want to say like maybe 2 minutes into round two, he ended up finishing Melvin Manhoff via TKO. It was probably the most one-sided fight I've seen in probably a good while, uh, at least a good year. It's been the first one-sided fight that I've seen in a good year, probably. Um, it was so clear that Melvin Manhoff had no business being in there with Corey Anderson. Good luck to Corey Anderson, though. I could see him becoming the 205 champion because he has to get past, I believe, Vadim Nemkov. So I could see him giving Nemkov a run for his money, or I could see that being a really good fight between those two. So that'd be exciting to see. But yeah, no, it was just a very one-sided fight, in my opinion. I didn't really enjoy watching it, and I wasn't the only one that said that. All of MMA Twitter who was watching the event with me, they were saying the same thing. They were like, wow, Melvin Manhoff shouldn't have been in there with Corey Anderson. People are like, well, they just gave Melvin Manhoff a wrestler knowing that damn well he doesn't do good against grapplers. Like, what kind of matchmaking is that? And that's the kind of matchmaking that you do when you want to test someone. And unfortunately, it seems Scott Coker was trying to test already veteranized Melvin Manhoff, and he should have been testing Corey Anderson, but he didn't. So anyway, congratulations to Corey Anderson. I guess the best option now going forward from here is give Corey Anderson a title shot, I guess. They have one of the I mean, they have shallow divisions left, right, and center over at Bellator, but their 205 division seems to be one of the most shallow. So definitely give Corey Anderson a title shot, because I can't, at the top of my head, I can't think of any other 205 contenders other than the double champ Ryan Bader right now. Well, he's not the double champ anymore. Vadim Nemkov took his title at 205, but still, he's the only one that I can actually think of right now before all else. But anyway, that's it for Bellator 251. I don't know if there's another Bellator coming this week. There might be. I know there's supposed to be some LFA, I believe, or maybe some Cage Fury or something. So I'll end up covering those this coming week. But I think that's it for Bellator for now. But yeah, what a main event for that for that promotion. It was pretty one-sided. But going in just a day before that, actually, we're going to be talking about none other than Dana White's Contender Series. It has returned. It's back in our good graces. We get to see new prospects rise from this show. Obviously, we know people like Kevin Holland and Sugar Sean O'Malley have made their names off of this show. So it's just one of those little mini shows that the UFC puts on that's exciting for hardcore MMA fans like me, because it's a chance for us to find out new prospects. And this week was awesome because it was all high action fights, and every single one of them ended in finishes, but none of them were quick. None of the finishes were super quick. The first finish of the night and the last finish of the night were maybe the quickest, but every single fight was a dog fight for the most part. None of them were one-sided. It was really fun. I think the only one-sided fight was the co-main event, and I'll get into that. But the main event of this week's Dana White's Contender Series was City Kickboxing prospect Carlos Ulberg, who's also Israel Adesanya's teammate, and that's the reason why he was there at the Apex on Wednesday during this taping. So he was up against veteran Bruno Oliveira to see who would get into the UFC. And then before that was Ignacio Bahamondes versus Edson Gomez, and then Luis Saldana versus Vince Murdoch. And then to start off the fight night, as we're going to get to now, it was a heavyweight bout to start things off between Jared Vandura and Harry Hunsucker. And I'm not kidding. That's the guy's name. Harry Hunsucker is his name. This was a fun fight, mainly because the story of the fight was that Jared Vandura was a good grappler, and Harry Hunsucker had really good cardio, and he was a good boxer. And that's how the fight started out. Jared Vandura wanted to stand with Harry Hunsucker. Harry Hunsucker would close the distance and throw these overhands and these little jabs that led into the overhands that would just land and find its target every single time. And that just showed how much of a fucking chin Harry Hunsucker had. So here's not Harry Hunsucker, Jared Vandura. This just shows Vandura was eating all these shots. Harry Hunsucker landed some good overhands that probably would have put out a regular heavyweight or, littler guys. Was hitting him with some really crisp boxing, some clean shots. Every shot that he landed was practically fucking clean on Jared's chin. But Jared just played the pace, man. He let Harry Hunsucker rush forward, and he waited for his moment to take it to the ground. He just let Harry Hunsucker tire himself out with just winging strikes. But that was a dangerous game because he was eating those strikes. But man, does Jared have a fucking chin on him. Jared takes him to the ground and then just starts eating him alive with these punches, man. Just starts raining down on him, gets him to churn, roll. He takes his back and sprawls him out, stretches his legs out, and then continues to pound on him. Doesn't even go for a submission to be merciful. He just continues to pound into the guy's side of the fucking head. And the ref had no choice but to step in, and it was a really good grappling display once it got to the ground. It was like game over the moment it got to the ground. Jared Vandura playing a very patient game that was dangerous because, like I said, he was eating shots from this guy, and this guy's known to have incredible power. So it was just exciting to see because, Vandera's playing it calm, but he could go out at any second, and he didn't. He had a chin. He has good power on the ground. He's very good at using his weight, and he ended up getting the win. And it was a good way to start the Contender Series because the next fight was really fucking fun. We had an absolute mismatch in sizes, in height, but where that had a big issue, it made up for their skill set. Both guys were pretty damn equal. Obviously, it was very clear that the taller guy, Luis Saldana, was going to probably edge out a decision if it went to decision, but that didn't deter Vince Murdoch. Vince Murdoch put the pressure on Luis Saldana the whole fight. It went 3 rounds, even though it finished in the 3rd round. It went 3 rounds. In the first 2 rounds, Luis Saldana just pushed the pace and kept backing up and just moving around the octagon, controlling the cage. But Vince Murdoch just kept putting the pressure on him. Had to force Luis Saldana to counter strike most of the time. He always closed the distance. Every time he would get hit with a jab coming in, he would just move forward and just eat him alive. And he put a lot of pressure on Luis Saldana, and I think he gave Luis Saldana an extremely hard fight. That being said, as I said, Luis Saldana was the taller guy, and it was pretty obvious the taller guy is going to win this. So, yeah, he played his game very smart. Like I said, he stayed on the outside, would land his jabs, and he would wait for the counter strikes as Vince Murdoch rushed in, and that played very good in his hand because in the 3rd round, 44 seconds into the 3rd round, he landed a front kick that hurt Vince Murdoch and set up a nice flurry for Luis Saldana that finished the fight via TKO, and it got him the W on Contender Series and most likely a contract or something. So just a little spoiler, all 4 winners got contracts. I can't even hide it. Every single fight was a finish, and pretty much in this series now, it's guaranteed if you get a nice finish or a finish for the most part, as long as it's not an extremely boring fight, you're going to get a fucking contract. So he ended up finishing Vince Murdoch via TKO. And with all of that riding into the next fight, we're on this big, incredible high of just finish after finish, and they were all fast-paced fights so far. These are just prospects, guys. These are like newbies, guys who just want to find their chance in the UFC. Yeah, you find a couple of veterans that want to find their way back to the UFC, but it's mostly young guys who are just like, yeah, I want my next chance. But that brings us into the next fight, because it wasn't the only mismatch in height on the card. This fight, the co-main event, was also an incredible mismatch. Over 9 inches in reach and 5 inches in height for Ignacio Bahamondes, and he was the younger fighter at 23 years old. That didn't deter Edson Gomez, though, for taking this fight. This guy is like, I think 26, 27. 5'6", 5'7" in the fucking welterweight division, folks. 170's got some pretty tall guys. 5'6" is more akin to being just a slightly undersized in the lightweight division, but in the welterweight division, you're facing guys who average 5'10", 5'11", 5'9". Like 5'8" is considered fucking short, right? But this guy came in with like a 5'6" height, and he played a very smart fight, just like Vince Murdoch did. However, the guy we're talking about is Ignacio Bahamondes. And the reason why is because of how he performed. This guy is young. He's not even touched his prime yet. And what he did to Edson Gomez was awesome. So just like Luis Saldana did, Edson Gomez closed the pocket just like Vince Murdoch, and Ignacio just used that to counterstrike and used his distance to keep Edson Gomez away. And unlike Luis Saldana, he did a way better job of doing that. He landed more evenly, not just to the head, but he was landing kicks and knees to the body, wearing this guy out. And the finishing sequence was awesome in the 2nd round. So the 1st round was the story. It was Ignacio Bahamondes just, holding the outside, landing shots, just chipping away at him. And then in the 2nd round, it was the same thing, but it led up to this point where he had Edson Gomez hurt. Edson Gomez was starting to back up against the cage, starting to cover up, and you could see Ignacio not straying away from the game plan. He had a plan. He was like, I'm going to chip away at every part of this guy's body, and then I'm going to take the finish when it comes. And that's what he did. He hurt Edson. Edson was covering up his face, and so Ignacio continued to put that pressure on and started hitting him with some body shots, which caused Edson to start covering up the body, and that opened up a beautiful front kick that landed on probably on Edson's nose, to be honest, but it was a beautiful front kick that landed on a tired, worn out Edson Gomez and knocked him clean out. Like, it was incredible. It was one of those highlight reel finishes. And that's going to bring us into the main event of the Contender Series, but it was one of those one of those highlight finishes. Even Dana, when he was reading out the contracts, he called this kid's name. He's like, you have to fucking pinch me and tell me it's April 1st to tell me that this knockout is not going to be number one on Sports Center the next day or on Sportsnet or whatever. I think it was Sports Center, he said. He was just absolutely hyped for this kid, just like the rest of us. It was an awesome knockout. I mean, it was a little expected because, like I said, taller guy against shorter guy, but he just, unlike Luis Saldana, he ate the shorter guy for lunch. Yes, Luis Saldana did a good job, but Vince Murdoch put on a better fight than Edson Gomez did. Edson Gomez just did what he could do, what he was capable of doing, and that's it. And he got eaten alive. It was a good balance between body strikes and head strikes, and that was probably what I loved the most about the finish. Was he didn't stray away from that game plan. He didn't see he was hurt, so he started flurrying at the head. He was like, I got to open this up because I have one idea and one idea only. I want to put this guy out cold, and he did. So that leads us into our main event, which was the middleweight fight between Izzy's teammate Carlos Ulberg and Bruno Oliveira. And this was a middleweight fight, but on the broadcast, it was set as a light heavyweight fight. So I don't know what to call it, because when you look at the results back, when you look at the records of these fighters, it's going to probably say middleweight, but it was light heavyweight, I believe. Anyway, that's besides the point. On one end, we have Bruno Oliveira, who is like 8-1, 8-2. This guy's got fucking submissions and knockouts on his record. And then in the other corner, we have Carlos Ulberg, who is 1-0. He's got one professional fight underneath his feet, and that's about it. And he's coming in fighting more so compared to him, a fucking veteran. I mean, the guy is kind of a veteran. He's 33 years old too, but that's besides the point. Ulberg comes in with just a main kickboxing background, and he's against a guy in Bruno Oliveira. And the fight starts the way you'd expect it. Bruno Oliveira is pushing the pace. He's landing the shots. He's got Carlos Ulberg on the back foot the whole fight, man. But the littlest thing you would have expected was that this fight was going to go past round one. As soon as you saw the fight, you're like, all right, Ulberg is playing a good fight. He's probably going to, this is going to go to decision. This is going to be the whole fight, though. It seems Bruno Oliveira is just going to push forward and hold the pace. Nah, Carlos Ulberg had better plans. As Bruno Oliveira was backing him up, Ulberg just landed this nice combo. It started off with a nice right hook that stunned Oliveira, and then a left hook that landed right after that right hook that just made Oliveira fall flat on his face, and then Ulberg just followed up with some more shots. Literally two shots put Oliveira into the next dimension, and it was incredible. This guy is 2-0 now. He's like 25 years old. He's only got 2 professional fights underneath him, and he did that on one of the biggest stages. Like, yeah, sign him the fuck up. And that brings us to the contracts. Every single one of these goofballs got a fucking contract last night. It started off with Jared Vandera. Obviously, he was going to get a contract. He did a very good job eating those shots. I don't know what's with Dana, but Dana likes when he sees guys just eating shots and taking it like it's fucking supper. And he even said that. He's like, I like this guy. He's got power. He can eat shots like it's nothing. And he's got a good wrestling. He's in. And I mean, I kind of felt bad because Dana also said, we need heavyweights. We need heavyweights bad. and it kind of took away from Jared's contract earning, but he did do a good job. He played a good fight. He played it patient, kept his hands up, ate the shots he had to, and then once he got to the ground, he finished it. He knew, he's like, this is my strong point, and I'm going to put it away early. Because one of the things is, yeah, you can have an incredible back and forth unanimous decision fight, but you'll either get a rematch on Contender Series, or very rarely will both of you get the contract. But if you get the finish, you are guaranteed to get the contract. No matter how slow the fight it was, if you get a finish, you're going to get the contract, right? So he got his contract, and that led us into Luis Saldana, who got his contract. And from what it sounded like when Dana was talking about it, it sounded like he was like, yeah, Vince Murdoch did a good job putting the pressure on Luis Saldana. It sounded like he was going to give Vince Murdoch a contract too, but he didn't end up doing that. I guess he just liked the way Luis Saldana played into that fight, because, like Dana said, Vince Murdoch did an incredible job putting the pressure on him and giving him trouble, and Luis Saldana stayed calm and played it perfectly. It was a good test for him. So he got his contract in the featherweight division, and that brings us to Ignacio, who we all knew once we saw that knockout, he was getting the contract. He was either getting a developmental contract where he'd get another fight on the Contender Series, or he was getting a fucking contract. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. That was a great showing on the Contender Series for a young 23-year-old in Ignacio Bahamondes. And then Carlos Ulberg, apparently the time between the knockout and Dana choosing the contract winners was so goddamn fast that Carlos Ulberg didn't even get a chance to go back to where the contract winners sit, because Dana saw the knockout, went to the back, and chose his contract winners immediately. Even Dana said that. Dana's like, yeah, tonight was real quick. Tonight's what you call a no-brainer, and it was. 4 finishes, all really good finishes. It's pretty obvious what's going to end up happening with these contracts tonight. So Carlos Ulberg ended up getting his contract, but he wasn't there sitting in the seat because he was in the back, getting ice on him and just probably celebrating with City Kickboxing and all the guys that were there with him, because, like I said, it's a big thing. But anyway, that was Dana White's Contender Series, and I'm so happy that it's back. Now we have midweek UFC to look forward to again, at least for a couple more weeks. I think the last week is November 17th. I think that's the last week for the Contender Series this year. I don't know when it's going to come back after that. But yeah, I'm really happy that this is back. I cannot wait to talk about this coming week's Dana White's Contender Series either. I don't think there's any big names on it except for Stephanie Frosto. But nonetheless, there's Danny Sabatello. I believe Danny Sabatello's on there. I don't know if he's the main event or not, but I'm excited because there's 5 fights this coming week, and like I said, Danny Sabatello. But I'm just excited to see who ends up getting into the UFC, because, like I said, the Dana White's Contender Series always ends up giving you incredible prospects to watch. So I'm excited for this to be back. I cannot wait to talk about it next. And that's it for the first half. I will catch you guys in the second half. We're going to be talking about this week's UFC card, because everybody was talking shit about it. I saw a lot of actual MMA journalists talking how shit this card and next week's card is going to be, and that they're not going to watch it or cover it. And I just got to say, keep hating, you motherfuckers. Keep the hate going. Every time you hate on a card you don't know the names of, you fucking give it the best omens ever. Every time, I swear to God, every fucking time these fucking cheesy ass douchebags decide, oh, no, this is a shitty card, it doesn't have any big names on it, or big names to my casual ass. Every time they hate on it like that, it ends up being a banger, fire, straight fucking explosions. I love it, and I cannot wait to talk about it. So we're going to get into that next. And I just got to say again, fuck you, journalists. You were so fucking wrong. This card delivered and more. And this was just as good, if not better, than the Halloween card last week. And I may be a little controversial in saying that, but out of 10 fights, one of them was a boring decision, and only 3 of them went to decision. Every other fight was a finish. The entire prelims, finishes. Not a single fight went to the distance on the prelims, I believe. It was all TKOs and submissions. And we got a fucking forearm submission. So we're going to get into that next. I will see you guys in the second half. All right, so let's get into this main card. Before I begin, some news just broke as I'm recording this. Canadian legend and longtime host and I think creator of Jeopardy, Alex Trebek, has passed away following his battle with pancreatic cancer today at the age of 80. And I may sound upset about this because I genuinely am upset about this. Alex Trebek has had a huge part in my life from when I'd stay home from school. I'd even watch Jeopardy at night with my parents and stuff. And a lot of Canadians and I'm everybody around the world even know who Alex Trebek is. And, you know, it's pancreatic cancer. It's one of the more dangerous cancers out there. But I had this hope in my heart that he was going to beat it. And there was no news about it, nothing. And it's been not, I think maybe just a year since he dropped off of Jeopardy for it. And yeah, it took his life today. So I just wanted to say my condolences to the Trebek family and the Trebek estate, and just rest in peace, Alex Trebek. I hope you're finally at peace now. You fought your battle hard, my friend, and now it's time to rest. Now it's time to relax. But enough of that sad shit. Whew, that was quite heavy. So we'll get into this event. I want to talk about the prelims real quick because, like I said, in the first half, there was a lot of analysts, not analysts, but a lot of journalists talking a lot of shit about this event and next week's event. Now, I can't say the same for next week's event because it hasn't happened yet, but they were talking a lot of shit about this week's event too, saying that it's not going to deliver. But it's really fucking stupid when you have people like Anthony Bierchak, Max Griffin, Darren Elkins, and Trevin Giles on the fucking prelims alone. Now, those names may not sound too good to, really, really casual people, and that's okay. I don't expect you to know those people, but more hardcore people should know people like Trevin Giles, Darren Elkins, and Max Griffin at least. And they were on the prelims. They were starting off the prelims. And there was another incredible fight on the prelims that ended up being on the main card because one of the main card fights with 2 decent names in them had to drop out due to COVID-19. So the amount of people on this fucking card, there's no way it was guaranteed to be garbage. But that brings me to the event. The prelims alone delivered in so many fucking ways. So, like I said, a lot of people thought that the prelims alone were going to be shit because there was a lot of unnamed guys to their thought. And they thought it was going to be nothing. The first fight of the night was a fight between training partners, Gustavo Lopez and Anthony Bierchak. Anthony Bierchak hasn't been in the UFC for a good while. I think he was a standout or whatever. I believe he was in the UFC at one point, but ended up getting dropped. And Gustavo Lopez was supposedly supposed to take on somebody else, and Bierchak stepped up and took this on short notice. His last fight, I believe, was like years ago, and he hasn't been in the promotion since. So this was his first time back in like I think 4 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, Gustavo Lopez just recently had a fight against Merab Dvalishvili, and despite it being Merab Dvalishvili, he put it on Merab. Merab handily beat him with his wrestling, but he gave Merab a little bit of a run for his money and took him all 3 rounds. So, there was a good name for Gustavo Lopez going into this fight. So he goes into this fight, and within 1 round, he's hitting Anthony with some nice left hands, drops him. They get to the ground, and he takes Anthony's back and immediately finishes him via rear naked choke. And it looked really good. It was really nice and slick. And absolutely pure respect between the two after, of course, their teammates. And Anthony Bierchak took this fight on short notice. So obviously there's going to be nonstop respect. But that finish itself was a good way to start the fight. Two training partners that actually went out and threw. They weren't scared of each other. It was hilariously awesome. I loved it. That brings us into our next fight, which actually some gnarly shit happened. And this fight was a welterweight bout between Max Griffin and Ramiz Brahimaj. His name is spelled Brahimaj, but it's pronounced Brahimaj, and I'm gonna respect his name by pronouncing it that way. But this guy hasn't fought in over 500 days, and he'd been waiting that long for a fight. He finally gets a fight against Max Griffin, and the way it just ended just makes my stomach churn thinking about it. So they put it on each other really fucking well. Ramiz, whatever his first name you want to pronounce it as, he put it on good. He was hitting Max Griffin with some good shots. Max Griffin, obviously, the veteran, moving a lot. His footwork was really good. He was never staying still. He never planted his feet. And when he did plant his feet, it was for like a split second for a punch. And then the moment he landed those punches, he was moving left and right all around again, constantly bouncing. So even though Ramiz was hitting him with some good shots, Max Griffin was constantly moving, but Ramiz was never out of the fight one bit. He was really hitting Max Griffin with some good shots every now and then. And that was the story for the first 2 rounds. And then all of a sudden it gets into the third round and both guys are looking a little tired now. Ramiz is looking a little beat up. So is Max Griffin. They start getting to the clinch and you can see that Ramiz's ear is now like swollen and, kind of wiggly jiggly. And they get up into the cage, like against the cage, and they're in a clinch. Max Griffin hits Ramiz in that same ear with an elbow, and next thing you know, Ramiz's ear is flapping like a fucking wing in the wind. It's loose as fuck. Max Griffin nearly severed Ramiz's ear with an elbow because it exploded. You didn't get to see the explosion, but you saw the moment it hit, and then the ear come completely loose. And I'm not gonna. I've already posted the picture on my social medias. I'm not gonna talk too much about it. I'm just gonna say when you look at the picture, you could see a hole into his head and his ears hanging. It's pretty gnarly. It was a pretty gnarly finish. And it's one of those instances where you just got to say that famous Mike Goldberg line, so you want to be a fighter. And it's like, yeah, like you look at that picture and it's like, do you really want to be a fighter? After seeing that, like, fuck, it was gnarly. Good fight. Great fight. But just an unfortunate ending for Ramiz. A legit ending, though. I mean, you have to stop it. You have to stop it. Like, not even, what was her fucking name? I'm trying to think of the name of the fucking female fighter. Leslie Smith, was it? Her ear exploded years ago in the octagon, and they had to end the fight. Like, the moment your ear explodes and almost comes off your head clean, like, yeah, no, that's the end of the fight. They stop it for less sometimes. So yeah, that was a legit stoppage. No controversy there. The only controversy was whether that man with that weak of ear should be in there or not. It just, wow. Oh, that finish was gnarly. Good fight by both guys. Ramiz did an incredible job. Just unfortunate finish, man. That brings us to the next fight, which is always guaranteed a banger when Darren Elkins stands in there. But he was up against Luis Eduardo Garagori, who is a kickboxer, and let me just say, Darren Elkins played a very smart game for who he was facing. He was facing an absolutely explosive Muay Thai artist. Guy could put you out with one shot. So Darren Elkins, I mean, not like Darren Elkins should be scared of eating shots. The guy eats shots for breakfast. But he played a very smart fight, went in there and immediately, yeah, he stood with Garagori a bit, but would always take Garagori down. And it just seemed like Garagori had nothing, had no response for those takedowns. He couldn't properly, like, he would scramble pretty good every now and then, but Elkins was doing the Habib movement where you just stick to them like glue. You have that confidence in your cardio and them carrying your weight that you just stick to them like glue and constantly try to take them to the ground. And that's exactly what Darren Elkins did for 3 rounds. Going into the third round, he took Garagori's back and finished it via rear naked choke. And this snapped Darren Elkins' I think like 5-fight win streak. So it was just an incredible fight from Darren Elkins. Very smartly played, very smartly put. I can't wait to see where Darren Elkins goes. He's always in an exciting fight, so there's no doubt about that. But that brings us to the next fight, which was Marcos Rogério de Lima and Alexander Romanov in the heavyweight division. And when I said in the first half that there was a crazy choke that probably shouldn't have worked, this was the fight where it happened. Let me begin. The fight was awesome. Both guys came out, but Jesus Christ, the quickness that Romanov landed that takedown on DeLima was just like a snap of the finger. Within like probably 5 or 6 seconds, he had DeLima on his back, and that was the story of the fight. DeLima would get back up every now and then, but that was pretty much the story of the fight. Romanov just taking him down and ground and pounding him. But the finish wasn't ground and pound. He tried to get a rear naked choke at first, or a guillotine, and that didn't work. And then later on, he's on top of DeLima, Romanov is, and he just places his forearm. He just places his forearm against his neck. For the most part, he's crushing the esophagus. Now, any Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner will look at you and tell you that this is not supposed to work. I don't know what he fucking did. If in the meanwhile he put that weight on the dude's neck, he was cutting the carotid artery. I don't know if or what, but he put this guy out cold by just resting his forearm on the guy's neck. That's how much weight he put on it. And I don't think there's many instances of a forearm choke. They didn't know exactly what to call it, so they just call it a forearm choke. There's not many instances of that choke. And I saw many people that I follow that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're like, dude, that's not supposed to work. How in the fuck did you make that work? Like, it was hilarious to see. A great wacky ass finish from Romanov, and he stays undefeated. I wanted to talk about that submission because, like I said, it was wacky as fuck. It's a submission that never fucking happens. It was hilarious. But that brings us into the prelim headliner, which was Trevin Giles versus Bevan Lewis. And I gotta say, Bevan Lewis was fighting a very smart fight the entire time. He stayed on the outside. He was hitting Trevin Giles with some really good punches. He was hitting Trevin Giles hard, but Trevin Giles ended up finishing it in the third via TKO. He hit Bevan Lewis with a shot that hurt him, backed him up against the cage, and he just didn't stop. He did not relent. He just kept eating. He just kept throwing shots. He just kept slamming shots and beating the absolute fucking shit out of him, and managed to get him down to the ground, like smacked him down to the ground, and the ref had to fucking put an end to the fight. So good win for Trevin Giles, but I gotta say, it was a smart fight played by Bevan Lewis. I thought if that TKO did not happen, I feel like maybe it would have been Trevin Giles' round, but I think Bevan Lewis would have just edged out the decision because rounds 1 and 2 could have very well been argued for him. He played a very smart fight, but like I said, all congrats to Trevin Giles. I believe Trevin Giles had been waiting for a while for a fight. He'd been scheduled to fight back in like August or September. That was canceled, so it's great to see him back in the cage, and he got a finish while he was out, so good for him. But that brings us into the main card, the meat and potatoes. The first fight that we're going to start off with is a women's strawweight bout between Yan Xiaonan, who is a Chinese fighter, against Claudia Gadelha, who is a well-known staple in the women's divisions, not just strawweight, but in bantamweight, flyweight, you name it. She's just well known to a lot of MMA fans in just women's MMA in general. And a lot of people don't like her because she won a very controversial decision against Angela Hill that I believe she lost very, very much. But I'm not going to get into that because then that would just be an extra hour of me ranting and watching the fight over and over and over again. So let's not get into that. This fight was technically like a top 5 contender fight. Yan Xiaonan is, she was 8th ranked going into this, and Claudia Gadelha was 4th ranked. I don't know why. I don't know why she was 4th ranked. She shouldn't have had that last win on her fucking record. Fuck her. Anyway, this is only the second Chinese fighter in the women's division that I know of, and obviously everybody knows Wei Li is the current strawweight champion. She is also Chinese. She's actually the first UFC Chinese champion. So this was an exciting fight for me because here's another Chinese contender, and she's going up against Claudia Gadelha. This is somebody who Angela Hill lost to as well, but in a very controversial decision as well. So both of these girls are fighting for the I beat Angela Hill title. Oh my god, I shouldn't laugh. But so these two went in the first round was Claudia Gadelha completely. Yeah, Yan Xiaonan had her moments. Hit some good shots, but Claudia Gadelha took her down to the ground and controlled her that whole round. But because of that, Yan Xiaonan went back to her corner and just fixed her shit. And then in the second round, it was different. She kept away from Claudia Gadelha, but hit her with some good shots, was on the defensive, but constantly counter striking and landing them. There was no issues. She did a good job. How do I put this? She put a good job adjusting to what Claudia Gadelha was doing with her wrestling. She stayed out of range for the takedowns, hit Claudia Gadelha with some shots to keep her guessing, and just rode that out for the next two rounds and ended up winning a 29-28 decision. So I guess Yan Xiaonan's the winner of the I Beat Angela Hill title, I guess. It was a fun fight though. Like I may not have made it sound fun, but like it was a nice little fight. Both girls riding their bicycles, and it was just strike after strike after strike. It was pretty fast paced. It wasn't one of those boring women's fights where they're just running away from each other and there's not much output. It was really fun. And like I said, that's why I like watching women's MMA. It's always high output, always explosive, always fun. But that brings us into the featherweight bout. This bout was supposed to be on the prelims, but a main card bout fell through due to COVID. Giga Chikadze, somebody who is quickly becoming my favorite fighter in this fucking promotion, against a guy that I didn't really know much about, Jamie Simmons. And I feel like this was a gimme fight for Giga Chikadze. Giga Chikadze had some bigger ranked guys. He actually had a ranked guy at I believe lightweight. A lot of people were saying it was Drew Dober, and then that fell through. He even got a top 15 guy at featherweight, but that fell through. And then Giga Chikadze just said, fuck it, I want to stay active, and they gave him this guy. This Jamie Simmons guy was a plus 600 underdog. Just to let you guys know how bad that this Jamie Simmons guy was in trouble. And not only that, but Giga Chikadze is a 6 foot fucking tall featherweight with a good reach advantage. He's a kickboxer and he shows it. And that's exactly what he did. He just stayed on the outside and picked away at Jamie Simmons, did not let Jamie Simmons even get close to him. Jamie Simmons couldn't even get any fucking takedowns. And when they get against the cage to clinch, Giga Chikadze would just immediately fucking reverse that. And eventually, close to the end of the round, Giga Chikadze hits fucking Jamie Simmons with a head kick that drops him, and then he just follows up with these vicious punches. Even I noticed even a little bit after, as I believe Herb Dean was the one reffing the fight, he stepped in, waved off the fight, and Giga Chikadze was still throwing a couple of strikes before he finally got off and said, "Oh, I'm not supposed to fucking do this." But good fight by Giga Chikadze, good finish by Giga Chikadze. I cannot wait to see him in the octagon next. Finally, against someone who is actually going to challenge him. Like I get why he took this fight against Simmons. He wanted to stay active because he says that's how you stay in the good graces of the fans. And it kind of is how you stay in the good graces of the fans. But yeah, I'll give it to Giga Chikadze. Good on him. It was a beautiful head kick too. And I thought he put him out cold there, but clearly he didn't. So he had to finish him up with those punches. But yeah, good finish by Giga Chikadze. And that had everybody hyped for the next bout, which was guaranteed to be fight of the night. And little known fact, it ended up being fight of the night. How about that? This was Raoni Barcelos versus Khalid Taha. And a little known fact about Barcelos is a lot of people are comparing him to WEC era Jose Aldo. Jose Aldo. Fuck. Sorry. They're comparing him to WEC Aldo, and I can see why watching this fight. He was explosive, very, very movement oriented, threw leg kicks like they were going out of style. just threw very fast punches, had a lot of power to him. And Khalid Taha, a man being a grappler, couldn't really get close or even keep him on the ground. Barcelos' sprawls were incredibly good, and he did a good job keeping Taha on the outside. That being said, even though Barcelos won the fight handily, Taha did a good job at bringing it to Barcelos. And that's the reason why it was fight of the night. Barcelos clearly won in the judges' scorecards and in the fans' scorecards throughout the whole fight. But this was a back and forth fight of Khalid Taha clinching him against the cage, trying to take him to the ground. And then when he can't, he's just like, fuck you. I'll just strike with you then. You want to strike with me? I guess I'll put my balls on the table and strike with you too, Barcelos. And that's what he did. Every time he couldn't get the takedown or they'd be against the cage and he'd try to get the takedown to clinch and couldn't, he would back away. Next thing you know, he's throwing fucking shots at Barcelos. Barcelos is throwing shots at him. And it was just nonstop for 3 rounds. It was so fucking fun. I was at the edge of my seat watching it. Now, I'm going to admit I couldn't watch it last night because I wasn't feeling the best, so I caught them all this morning. And when I was watching it, it was like 7 in the morning. I'm watching this fucking fight, catching up. And I'm like standing up off my futon, like hyped as fuck about this fight. This fight was back and forth despite how handily Barcelos won. And it was like Taha just didn't want to be out of the fight. It was explosive and it was so fun. I can't wait to see Barcelos in the bantamweight division. I'm so excited for this guy's future career. He's 33. He's directly in his fucking prime. And like I said, he's bringing a lot of fucking comparisons to WEC and early UFC Aldo. So I'm excited to see where this guy goes. And honestly, I could see him becoming top 15 and, giving some of the top 15 guys some trouble. But that's enough of that fucking fight because I'm going to get into the main event. But before I get into that, unfortunately, I did say that we had one shitty fight, and it ended up being a decision. Out of the 3 decisions on the card, 2 of them being really, really fun fights. This one was hands down the worst. I've been seeing people saying that it's the new Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou. And I can see why. I didn't even end up finishing this fight. I couldn't. The whole fight was just both of these guys running away from each other and barely striking. Not really any ground exchanges. It was literally Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis 2. Or, I mean, all over again. Not 2. They haven't fought for a second time. This was Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis all over again. Both guys just kind of keeping away from each other. Arlovsky playing his smart game, but I don't know what the fuck Tanner Boser was doing. And that was literally the story of the fight. It was, I mean, if it's enough as is, heavyweight fights are very slow paced and they get tired easy. So it gets boring after a while, really, really fucking fast. But that being said, this was very sad. Both guys weren't really tired after the end of the fight. And like I said, it was just them kind of dancing around the cage the whole time. Not something you expected from this fight because Tanner Boser, he's on an incredible win streak that's just constant finishes and knockouts. And Andrei Arlovsky, everybody knows him as the violent finisher. Like, yeah, he's been finished just as many times as he's finished people, but this guy's the former heavyweight champion, the man who beat Tim Sylvia, the man who's been in the UFC for more than 20 years and is still getting knockouts. And this is the fight that we got. I'm not as mad at Andrei Arlovsky, though, as I am at Tanner Boser because Andrei Arlovsky is chinny and he has been chinny for the back end of his career now. But that still didn't entice Tanner Boser to go and try to get the knockout. He just kind of stayed there with his dick in his hands. And that was the whole fight. So I will say that the co-main event was complete and utter trash. And I still love Tanner Boser, but I'm very upset and disappointed with how that fight turned out. I was expecting a fun fight by both guys. It ended up being Lewis and Ngannou all over again. And I don't like that. That fight itself was boring as fuck. We don't need a second version of it. But thankfully, the main event wasn't the same as the co-main event. The co-main event meant nothing to this card because the main event delivered. We had number 1 ranked contender Thiago Marreta Santos, the man, only one of 2 men recently to have come close to beating John Jones. This man took John Jones to a split decision on one fucking knee and brought the fight to him the entire 25 minutes. Obviously, the other guy being Dominic Reyes, but this guy has had knockouts on Jan Blachowicz and stuff, and he's just got knockouts on a lot of other incredible light heavyweights throughout this entire division. But he's going up against the number 3 ranked and veteran in Glover Teixeira. But the thing is, Teixeira is getting really old, and this was expected to be a very easy fight for Thiago Santos. But this was also supposed to be an exciting number 1 contender fight who's going to fight Jan Blachowicz next. The problem with that being is Israel Adesanya, being a little cocksucker, decided, I want to go up and fight Yan because he easy fight, and that's good for legacy. Herkadirk. And ruined that entire premise for this main event. So we don't know what the fuck's happening now after this finish, but I guess let's get into the main event. So the main event, both guys came out swinging. Thiago Santos hurts Glover Teixeira and forces him to sprawl in the very first round. Obviously, that's a very veteran move to do. Get at the legs, tuck your chin in as you're hurt. Don't allow any more shots to land. And he takes Thiago Santos down. That's the whole story of the first round, is Thiago Santos on the ground getting ground and pound. But the thing is, a lot of people are like, is this Thiago Santos's round because of what he did to Glover Teixeira in the opening minutes? He hit Teixeira with like a left or right that was counter. And like I said, you could see it hurt Glover because Glover stunned up for a second and then kind of tipped into the fucking takedown. It was almost like he fell, like he was about to drop flat on his face, but he held onto the legs to save himself and sprawl, which is a smart move, but that's how bad Thiago Santos hurt Glover Teixeira. But after Glover Teixeira noticed that Thiago Santos couldn't really do anything on the ground, that was the story of the fight. Second round, Glover Teixeira immediately took him down and started eating him alive with punches, constantly keeping his positions dominant, and almost finished Thiago Santos with a rear naked choke at the very last seconds of the bell in round 2. So it was seeming to be Glover Teixeira's fight. I don't know how. This guy's like in his 40s, but he was beating Thiago Santos's ass. That leaves us into the third round. It's the opening minutes of the third round. Glover Teixeira is coming in to get the takedown, and suddenly Thiago Santos hits him with a left that drops Glover on his ass. And Thiago Santos jumps on him and starts eating him alive with shots. And I thought that was going to be the end of the fight. But Glover just played it cool, played it out, let it happen, reversed the position, took Thiago Santos's back, and with under 2 minutes into the third round, finished Thiago Santos with the same rear naked choke he almost finished Thiago with in the second round. And Glover Teixeira is now the number 1 contender of the light heavyweight division. And that being said, I think that Yan versus Teixeira has to happen. I know that Izzy's going to jump up there and do the super fight with Yan, but I don't feel that's right. I know that Izzy's pretty much cleaned out the middleweight division of contenders for right now, but I don't feel that's right because Yan hasn't defended his belt. This would be a good defense for Jan Blachowicz. The guy who beat Jan Blachowicz got completely dominated by Glover Teixeira, 40-year-old Glover Teixeira. So I'd love to see Teixeira. I'd love to see Teixeira get his title shot. He even begged and pleaded for the title shot. That just leaves the question: what's next? Is Izzy versus Yan the next fight that's going to happen? Because that seems like that's going to happen. They're trying to eye it sometime for March 2021. But the other question is Teixeira versus Yan going to happen? Yet again, that's probably going to be sometime in March 2021 or more because Yan's manager and fiance is having a baby, and they're not going to be back in the game until after that, which is understandable. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the fights. One last little announcement. Curtis Blades and Derek Lewis are fighting off on November 28th, so I'll be covering that event. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.